Welkom bij een aflevering van Groen, een podcast van Femke Cornelissen.
En Maarten Goet. En we hebben onze eerste podcast opgenomen in Seattle.
Ja,
Een bijzondere locatie.
het is sowieso mooi om op de campus te mogen zijn, want daar gebeurt het.
Ja.
En het was volgens mij jouw eerste keer daar.
Eerste keer, ja. En super gaaf om dat mee te maken.
Ja.
Ja, voor de mensen thuis, het is echt gewoon een soort van dorp, hè? Een dorp, een kantoordorp. Met allemaal Microsoft kantoren. En daar loop je dan langs. En daar zitten we gewoon allemaal, allemaal kantoorgebouwen.
Ja.
Met taxis en busjes en pendeldienstjes om je van het ene gebouw naar het andere gebouw te brengen.
Ja, want het lijkt wel een mythisch ding als je er nog nooit geweest bent. Van nou, dat is een afgesloten terrein, enorme campus.
Ja.
Nou, er lopen gewoon wegen doorheen. Het zijn gewoon kantoorgebouwen, gewoon mensen die er werken.
Ja.
En net zoals iedereen eigenlijk. Maar dan wel, ja, daar zijn wel de mensen die de producten maken. En we hebben ook wel een paar hele mooie mensen mogen ontmoeten.
Ja, hele mooie mensen. Onder andere Mark Kashman, waar we vandaag onze podcast eerder mee opgenomen hebben, maar vandaag gaan publiceren. Dus heel erg leuk om die ook te spreken. En ook een bijzondere locatie waar we dat hebben mogen doen.
Ja, en ik moet zeggen, in de 15 jaar plus dat ik dan op de campus geweest ben, was ik er ook nog nooit geweest. Want ja, waar zaten we? We zaten hoog in de bomen.
Ja, precies. In de Treehouses, ja. Ik weet, het moet nog steeds een beetje laten landen dat we daar gezeten hebben. Want het is gewoon heel bijzonder om een soort van boomhut in te klimmen en daar dan je vergadering te hebben.
Ja. En dat was ook wel bijzonder, want het was nog niet heel warm. Nee. Kachel moest even aan, maar die moest ook weer uit toen we gingen de opname starten. Ja. En uiteindelijk was dat ook een soort natuurlijk eind, want we hadden het zo koud. Ja. Dat we dachten, nou hier stopt ook podcast.
Ja, als je inderdaad wat trillingen in de podcast voelt, dan zal het de kou zijn die we in het huisje hebben gehad. Dat we een beetje aan het trillen waren van de kou, maar het was een geweldige locatie om dat mee te maken en om daar te zijn. En Mark Kashman is natuurlijk gewoon een superleuke, gezellige, vriendelijke man.
Ja, want wat doet Mark?
Ja, die is senior product manager van volgens mij vooral SharePoint hoek. En inmiddels, hij spreekt over allerlei dingen zoals list en loop. En is echt een voorloper op het gebruik van natuurlijk diverse Microsoft producten.
Ja.
En hij doet volgens mij heel veel binnen Microsoft. Onder andere ook bijvoorbeeld de keynote voor Jeff Teeper die hij voorbereidt. En hij werkt veel samen met Jeff Teeper. En wat ik zo leuk vind is dat hij zo toegankelijk is. En je echt, je voelt je echt op gemak bij hem. En dat is echt heel, heel, heel relaxed.
Heel fijn, ja. En hij loopt ook echt al eventjes mee.
Ja,
hij zit
18 jaar hè, geloof
18
ik.
18 jaar of zo, hè? Dus die doet echt al even mee bij Microsoft. Heeft denk ik alle versies van SharePoint vanaf het begin meegemaakt. Ja. En ook wel echt een groot community fan of supporter.
Ja, precies. Dat is ook wat hij echt ondersteunt en wat hij heel belangrijk vindt. Omdat hij daar de toegevoegde waarde echt van ziet. En hij vraagt ook continu van wat vinden jullie hiervan? Of zou je hierbij kunnen helpen? Dus hij is echt een promotor van de community. En een belangrijk persoon binnen Microsoft in mijn ogen.
Ja, absoluut. Nou, we hadden vragen voorbereid, die we meegenomen. Zoals gebruikelijk hebben we ook weer een grappig einde van de podcast. Want we laten hem dan vragen kiezen.
Ja, een groene envelop die we van tevoren wat vragen hebben opgesteld. En waarvan wij ook niet weten welke er uiteindelijk gekozen worden. En hij koos daar inderdaad een envelop.
Ja. Nou, volgens mij is het een mooie podcast geworden. We gaan nu luisteren naar Mark Kashman en horen hoe zijn avonturen zijn in Microsoft 365.
Ja, precies. Let's go. Thank you for taking your time today for our podcast. Can you tell a bit about yourself and your role at Microsoft?
Yeah, currently I sit on the SharePoint and OneDrive engineering team. And the team that I just recently moved into, the big focus is the customer experience. But it's not necessarily a sales job. It's not a marketing job. I recently moved from the marketing organization. So I sit in a place at Microsoft where we talk with customers a lot. And my job is at the tail end when we've got good news and announcements, how to get that out there and amplify it and, get as many people aware of what we're working on. But the other part of my team that I now work a little bit more on is when we have early technology and customers who have questions or are trying it out for the first time and they get a little stuck, our team is kind of brought in to help them nudge a little bit beyond, not so much to get them to buy, but just to get them to try and make sure it works for them.
That sounds amazing. It looks like the best job that there is.
It's great. It's great. The customers will always give you their honest opinion, whether they like something or not. And if they don't, then that's usually where our team sits anyway. And then just generally speaking, some of the teams that I work with, I also help them with their products. And so we'll talk a little bit later maybe about Microsoft Lists. A lot of what we do with SharePoint inside of Teams. And, the history goes back to things with OneDrive and Stream. And there's all this products.
A lot to talk about.
Everything's open, but, mostly Lists and SharePoint these days.
Okay.
Yeah, because you said history. So how long have you been with Microsoft and how did you get into tech or Microsoft and to where you are today, making all that good news about what you're doing with the team?
Yeah, it was my approach into Microsoft was definitely I got my foot in the door. And then as they, were trying to close it on me, I was like, no, not yet. But in the Wayback Machine, about 18 years ago, I started as a vendor at Microsoft.
Oh.
And so we were building similar to what we're doing here, recording. I would work with a lot of the teams that were building products to get information out to the Microsoft field sellers.
Oh, yeah.
So those were originally the technical field sales and then the solution specialists, which is now just kind of the broader account teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat in a room and recorded, with everybody to get their training out. And then that led me to meeting a few people from the different product teams. And lo and behold, I met somebody from the SharePoint team and they offered me this role, which is kind of where I've been for the last 10 plus years of the product manager for SharePoint Online, which we just refer to now as SharePoint in the cloud, SharePoint, Microsoft 365. And that's led to being a part of a lot of different launches because as you both well know, and just to inform your audience, there's a lot of things built on SharePoint, both back in the Wayback Machine, but also currently. So I went through both rebranding and the launch of SkyDrive, which is now OneDrive. I was...
Brings back memories.
It does, doesn't it? It's kind of fun to say.
Yeah, I was supposed you're going to say BPOS or MOS.
We can go to BPOS. And maybe that's the quiz. What does BPOS stand for?
Femke's from the Viva age. We just talked about the Viva Explorers.
Gotcha. I'll help you. It's the Business Productivity Online Suite.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that was in the early days, SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, Link Online. Everything now has a different name and a different brand. But I also helped with things like Office 365 Video, which is now Stream. A number of things that we do in Viva are based on SharePoint.
Yeah.
And List, of course, is completely built on SharePoint, just rebranded.
Yeah, Microsoft List.
Yes.
You have also Microsoft List socks on.
I do
now.
have List socks on. In fact, I should have brought List swag for you both.
Yeah.
I can get you some beanies, which would be nice, because if you can't hear it in our voice, it's a little chilly in the room.
It is. We're actually on this really cool location now. Thank you for that, Mark, for being in the Microsoft Treehouse. And it's chilly because, we're in a tree, in a house of wood. But it's an inspiring location, like being on campus in a treehouse. That's new to both of us, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, there are a lot of different look and feels to the rest of the campus. There's a number of different buildings, big and small, a lot of different product groups, kind of build out their own, what do they want on the inside. But the building that we're in really is just a treehouse. If you saw it from the outside, we literally are like, squirrels gathering nuts and talking about tech. But it was really cool because they offer it for people to build out, and it's kind of a fun room to come to.
I guess we're now associating Microsoft SharePoint and all of the cool stuff with squirrels and treehouses. As like with Microsoft Security, you have sharks with laser beams emitting from their eyes.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
So I guess every group has their own icon.
I like it. Well, we've had the SharePoint monkey. Maybe this is the List squirrel.
Yeah. That's so there is quite several people who are working with you. And how does that work with teams here in Redmond and somewhere elsewhere?
Yeah, one lens to look through is because of something like the pandemic, we all kind of scattered to the winds and worked from our homes. But to the benefit, I think Microsoft has always been pretty open about how the different teams work together. Yep. Every once in a while you come across I didn't know that team was working on that. That was interesting. But a lot of the foundation of SharePoint just as a role that it plays in Microsoft means it's going to be a foundational element to Viva, or there's an experience in Teams, or Stream is now on SharePoint. And so there's the core elements of people that work on SharePoint. And then there are a lot of the people that are from the Stream team or the Viva team or partners that we work with to early adopt on, are the APIs right? And stuff that's way above my level. I'm not a developer, but I'm involved in a lot of the how do we work together, and how do we communicate, obviously, the value that's combined. And so a lot of times, one last example I would just say is some of the things that I am helping with, or my team is helping with, is how do we talk about X product? But it's based on SharePoint, but we don't talk SharePoint. So the brand kind of moves to the back end. And so that means a lot of people have to then come together. And if you look around this campus where we're recording, I can walk around to a couple buildings and I can connect with some of those people. But then we've got teams in Ireland. We've got teams probably close to where you are in Europe. We've got one of our dev leads, Vesa, who is part of the community, Vesa Juvonen, in Finland.
Yeah.
And so even on my most immediate team, we're pretty dispersed. So oftentimes we're on Teams calls, which you probably know way more than I do. So I've just, adapted to that like everybody else. But I feel like internally we work pretty well together, but we're highly dependent on our partners and, of course, the customer, where we started talking a little bit ago, is always the voice of the customer, plays into it.
And that's an interesting angle, because you said that SharePoint has been around for a long time. It's fundamental to a lot of things the company does and the solutions Microsoft has, and that customers depend on. But then customers want things, these teams want things, everybody wants something, I guess, from SharePoint and the Microsoft 365 suite. Like, how do you prioritize in what to invest in or what to develop in?
I'll give you the lens that I think, if I can steal from things that I've heard from Jeff Tieper, who is, lead engineer for OneDrive, SharePoint, now Teams and Mesh.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the conversations start with, what is it that we're trying to be, doing new and innovative, like Microsoft Loop as one example. It's pretty cool tech. If you look at it, it does things that SharePoint never did, but it's built on SharePoint. And the earliest part of the conversation, as far as that I'm aware of, was the notion of, hey, there's this really great idea that the Loop team has, but they shouldn't be building a new repository. And same with the Teams team. If you think about the Files tab in a Teams channel, there was a notion early on like, the Teams team at the time was going to build a storage mechanism or whatever. And you can kind of just track the whole, just from a storage layer. SharePoint is the layer for Loop. SharePoint is the layer for Stream. SharePoint's the layer for Teams. And that's all, to the benefit of, but sometimes it's that conversation where what should you not build? Because it's already there and it's already trusted by our customers. It already has so much innovation in and of itself. The storage layer of SharePoint does a lot already. And for teams that would maybe try to create something like that on their own, it would be a lot of waste of time. And it would be one thing that, from a customer perspective, that they have to sign off on. And you probably know this way better than I do. The security layer, to be able to sign off and say, yes, we'll put our content there. With SharePoint in the mix, it's usually, okay,
it's taken care of.
Yep.
Yeah, it's done.
Okay, now show me the cool stuff.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we said that fundamentally Microsoft as a brand has that equity where we're trusting the company to do it in a safe way, safeguarding our privacy and whatever. But like you said, the whole ecosystem comes together, playing a role for that customer for all of the needs they have. Yeah, impressive that SharePoint has such a lively place in all these solutions over the years, I would say.
Yeah. You talked about Loop earlier. Do you have some scenarios that you say Loop is really great for?
I've seen it most often used, a really simple one, just to get started if people aren't familiar with Loop, is in a Teams meeting. At the very head of the meeting, if it's kind of a more organic ad hoc meeting, is just to put a loop in for the agenda.
Yeah.
What do we want to talk about? What's the most important thing? And there may be already two things that people are like, we're going to talk about this and this, but you have an hour or two. And the nice thing about the loop is you just put in, whether it's a bulleted list loop or actual agenda loop, they're all components. And in the chat, then everybody who's a member of that chat right there and then in the meeting can put in, here's what I'd like to talk about. Let's not forget to, cover the quarterly budget. Let's not forget to talk about who's going to be covering customer X, whatever the scenario is. And it's really nice because, if I add an item, you add an item, you add an item, it's not a thread that then I have to scroll up and down through. It's just that component. So it's pretty concise. I'll give you an example of one that I just did where we're working with Jeff Teeper. You'll probably hear me mention him a couple times because part of my role is supporting Jeff. And so together we're working on the Microsoft 365 conference that's coming up. And so Jeff will send me an initial, hey, here's what we want to cover. And then my job will be to flesh it out a little bit or to connect with different speakers or owners. And then at some point, we'll go from the loop that is just something that he started or I started, and then we'll start to share it with his co-presenters and anybody that's coming to the conference and whomever. And what's really nice is I send it as a link in a chat, in an Outlook, in a email or anything, and it's the same component. And then it just resolves to be the most up-to-date view. So if he makes a change or one of the co-presenters says, yeah, I'll get that in there. And so it's just kind of an easier to reference single item that's always live.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool.
And the Microsoft 365 conference, I've heard it's in Vegas this year.
It is.
The team is supporting it, which is a great thing. Lots of MVPs and professionals gathering there.
Yeah.
But community in general, like talking a bit about the importance of community and how you could build upon each other. Like, what's your view on community at large?
That's a big question in that it's important and has, of course, a lot to it. So I feel like I can comfortably say I've been a part of this community for a while. And the part about it that, as much as you put in, usually you'll get more back because there's just the whole community. You are only one part of it. But I think the real value, if you look at it from an event perspective, is when I go to the event, there are people that I know that are going to be maybe interested in what I have to share and vice versa. I'm, around, kind of this similar mind of people sharing technology. It happens to be a Microsoft community. So, but it goes beyond that. Technology is of interest to most of these people. So, a lot of great conversations. The really important thing, I think, from a Microsoft perspective is usually the community is not shy.
No.
And whether it's the Microsoft MVP, which, has kind of a reason to share and it's almost part of your charter, that goes whether you're an MVP or not in the community, whether it's an event or a side conversation or just throughout the year, is you really do feel like anybody can be a part of the community. And if they are, they aren't shy about sharing what is or isn't working. And the isn't working part can be uncomfortable, but it can be more valuable to hear than not hear. Because if you don't know something's not great, then you don't even think to fix it, and then you've lost a lot of people. So the community always, I feel, keeps everybody, in check. And then
it keeps everybody straight.
You have to. And then the other lens is, and at the end of the day, there's some form of a share pint, and there's always fun in the community. So it's a give and take, and then there's always the fun at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you're a productivity person and love to make things like lists. What is the best list you ever made?
The best I'll maybe give you 3 examples. The best list that I've made, in the sense that it's been used a number of different times. So the kind of my job currently, but more so in my previous role, I would manage a lot of what we would do at an event, the sessions, the keynotes, the this and that, and just coordinate, with the different speakers and the different owners. And it's a list of sessions that Microsoft is going to put on at an event. But because there's more than one event per year and more than one team supporting the event, the list became the central place where we would all manage titles, descriptions, speakers, dates, times, room, session code and links and all that stuff. And so after 1 or 2 events, I kind of got the list that I like for how I would, manage my job. So I get to format the list. So I originally used one of our templates, which is the event itinerary template. Go figure.
Oh.
And then off of that, I added my columns and choice fields and, made it look how I wanted it to. And to give you kind of a visual sense in the audio world, if there were the Teams team, the Power Platform team, the OneDrive SharePoint team, and the Viva team, often would be who I work with. And then oftentimes the diversity and inclusion track. So there are 5 groups or tracks. And so in lists, I can make those each a different color. So that's the one list. The value, though, is the next list. Then I would just kind of copy it. The formatting, which is a feature in lists, where you get, create a list from a list.
Yes.
But the real value, just to answer your question fully, is when I enabled somebody else to do that on their list for their events. That was the one kudo that came back to me without really being a kudo was, hey, Mark, can I use your list for the event that we're doing? And I didn't have to do anything.
They saw the value.
They saw the value, and they liked, whatever, all our events, track something in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most useful one, driven for an events.
Yeah.
This will be really quick. The other fun one that I created just purely for an example was we now have lists in preview for the consumer space. So for my home life but it's also meant for small businesses. You can do a number of different things. And it's not so much the trick area of the list, it's that I can share it anonymously. So I put together a fun list of all the Batman characters.
And Catwoman.
I would not, Catwoman.
Joker.
For
That's
sure.
why you're the Joker.
That's right. I can tell you all the iterations of the Jokers.
So there's going to be another episode.
It was a really fun list. And one of the best views. So in lists, you can create a different view. So each character got a view. So you could see all characters or Jokers and this and that. But also the poster art. This is from, I don't know how many years ago, 60, 70 years ago, the first Batman posters. So it was really fun to build. It was,
wow.
It was a big list. Yeah, exactly. And it was really fun to tweet out, hey, we've got this MSA preview. You can sign into your Microsoft account. And here's one example. And the longevity, not taking any credit except for it, I've used it now a lot. And it's still up and running. If you want, I can share a link. You can put it in the show notes.
I'm actually interested.
And it's fun. But it's also one of those where it's like easy tutorial.
Yeah.
All right, that's a list, different views, some of the different choices I made. It's very easy to learn from.
I guess you had a good year last year with the new Batman movie coming out.
That's right. That's the thing is that now it's like there's so much new content, and I didn't even touch.
Need to update the list.
I think I have like 1 or 2 of the animated series, but there's just a ton of.
That is.
And then I did get somebody who responded and said they wanted to do a similar list for the Doctor Who show.
I think Stacey Cashmore in Holland is quite a fan there.
And then somebody said you should do one for the Marvel universe. And I was like, oh, God. I can only do one big list. How many characters does the MCU have? So
you need a list to create a list. To know what a list to create.
Just to be really clear, so nobody makes a scene, we could handle the scale. Lists can handle the scale of the MCU. But for one person, that would be a big job.
Wow, MCU. I didn't think we'd get to the MCU today, but we're in a good spot. Taking it from MCU to AI, OpenAI, because there's been a lot of buzz going on, and Microsoft did a good investment, a deep investment already years ago, but even recently. And Teams Premium, now with some features coming out that are AI-enabled, specifically OpenAI. Like, what is the impact that AI will have? And again, a broad question. I'm sorry for that, Mark. But what is the impact you see that AI has on the future of productivity and Microsoft products and what have you?
Yeah, I will definitely have to lean on sort of what I've been reading and, some of the things that I know are either already public or probably a no-brainer. But, I feel like the component of AI that we've been building for a really long time, and we'll get to OpenAI, I don't want to not answer, is Microsoft Graph. So in the early part of SharePoint, getting back to kind of the foundation of where things go or where things start from, there was the search index. So in the SharePoint world, a lot of people would build out these really cool things with search-based experiences. Kind of how can you make your intranet a little bit fresher? And then along comes the graph, which again, the end user side of it is it knows who you are, what you work on, and presents you with things you might be interested in. Yeah. So the AI component is I sign into a site, I see recent files, I see what you've been working on, if the privacy concerns are, certainly open access. And then where it takes it to this next level, I feel like has been in the last couple of years, before OpenAI becomes what we're starting to build off and invest in, is that notion of, I see what you're trying to do, and let's help you get there a little bit faster. So there was kind of the Q&A, where you could kind of say out loud, here's how I want to build my query. I think it was in Power BI. And now there's the GitHub Copilot.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Those are all, foundational elements that now with OpenAI, I think the chat GPT-3 and what's coming with 4, which I don't have any insight. I've just heard it's mind-blowing. Like if you thought 3 was cool, wait till 4. And the buzz.
It's like Batman.
It's just like Batman. It's just like Batman. Here to protect your productivity or something like that.
But I guess it's something that Microsoft is deeply concerned about and invested in, and also, but is able to materialize in a way that makes sense for the user. Like you said, it's something actionable, even as small as it is or as big as it is, something actionable to make their life more productive or...
I think it's that. It's there are a lot of complexities on how you build out something like a Power Automate flow.
Yeah.
Could we make that easier? Then there's a lot around communications. I think a lot of scenarios you see publicly with ChatGPT are, you give it a prompt, you ask it to write, and, it'll do that. But that's off of the internet. Imagine that, with your own content.
Yeah.
And it's not just a writing scenario. There's a lot of things like we're already maybe not quite yet with OpenAI. I don't want to spoil anything because I don't really know, but we introduced a pretty big investment for Microsoft in Microsoft Syntax. And there's a lot that the Syntax team has built with existing technology today that gives the ability to understand content, to give you a kind of quick summary of, or to be able to detect which type of document it is. Is it a contract? Is it an invoice? And you do some of your own manual programming, where I think the OpenAI stuff will take it. You see it in the Microsoft Designer software, where you can build your own materials. And, if you can't afford an Illustrator, or, you're just trying to do some of the things, you already have the assets, you just now need the 10 little things for social. It's just generative AI, which I'm not an expert to speak about. I'll be pretty honest about that. But it's really cool to hear the different teams thinking about the different scenarios. And we can't just make it, write my email for me.
No.
It's got to be more valuable than that. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Nice. There's a lot of buzz around VR, avatars, that kind of... but also Mesh and Teams. How do you see the future of collaboration with meetings?
Yeah, I have to just ask also, have you created your avatar yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I figured.
Of course.
Yeah, you probably created it before I did. I felt like I was on the wait list for a while. And then, but I remember everybody told me, you're gonna have to set aside 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because the second that you can build your avatar, you're going to get caught up in, getting the glasses right, I have a beard, and, all that stuff. So I've done that, so I can answer your question.
But kudos to Microsoft also in that space. Think about the inclusivity on avatars. Like, it's not just doing avatars for the sake of whatever's next, but also doing it in a way that represents you as a person, whoever you are, whatever you are.
Yep. And I feel like I've done it maybe 2 or 3 times with consumer tech. So there's the Bitmoji. I can't remember. There was an Xboxing Live that used to be an avatar that you could build. And you can kind of get it right. But now it's like your lips, your eyebrows, your wrinkles, your this, your that. You, of course, can make the choices. I went into the wrinkles. I was like, I think I have to add wrinkles to be accurate, right? But I always wear a hat, and
you could
whatever.
go into meetings as a 30-year-old.
I could,
potentially.
Well, they shipped before the avatars. They shipped the whole lighting technology, which I always thought was a little funny. Like, I'm not trying to fake anybody out. The second that I start talking, they know he's over 50, and he's always talking about SharePoint, this in the past. And, but the scenarios I think is really cool. Like, the scenarios that I thought were pretty cool were the obvious ones, like there's fatigue, being on video all the time. I haven't felt that personally, but I get it. I know there are meetings that I will join, and it's just, nobody has their video on because you don't need to.
And it's also to some part culturally defined. Like some regions will not have their webcam on and some other regions will say, we are all putting it on. Can you also turn on yours?
Yep.
It's actually something that differs quite a bit here and there.
I agree. One other scenario that's come up that I actually think is a really simple one, and it may not be the excuse for why you invest in your avatar. I think it is. But there have now been a couple times where there'll be a meeting scheduled during lunch. And that's fine. You figure out your own schedule. You either attend or you don't. Yeah, but the first time, maybe I'm just finishing my meal. So I want to represent, so that the whomever scheduled the meeting, if they're starting to present, they at least have somebody that is there to look at. But they don't have to look at me, biting into the sandwich, drinking the drink, and, slobbering all over the place. Yeah. So maybe for 10 minutes, it'll be my avatar. And if I want to react to something, I can do, the wave, the thumbs up, the dab, all the silly things. But I can actually be more engaging or engaged with, however you look at it. And then after 10 minutes, I'm done with my lunch, napkins, do I look okay? And then I go back to video.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's a simple one. And I've heard that's not...
That's kind of scenarios.
It's not an original thought, but I've heard a lot of people that they use their avatars while they're eating or, for a moment while they want to be in the meeting, want to be engaging, but maybe don't necessarily need somebody looking at them.
I had the same with my children when they were sick, but I had a meeting, so put it on and put my children around, and then just was there.
Yeah. And if you see some of the stuff that they're toying with, I think they've already shown. Is that'll kind of start to mimic your mouth,
mimics yourself,
and your movements. I think will get there.
Yeah.
But the not to go too much further because I'm not that deep in where they're headed. But I know we acquired a company or at least an application called AltSpace VR.
Yeah.
And I have attended a full conference in AltSpace.
Yeah.
As me. I had a headset, so I was a little bit more immersed, and I had the paddles, so you could actually have hands, and it was amazing. The part that I kind of overlooked was the audio. So we're sitting at a table, and you're to my right, Femke, you're to my left, and to the podcast, and I know it all sounds the same, but in this AltSpace event, when somebody was talking to me, visually they were to my left, and I can hear them in my left ear. So the stereo audio was also really cool. And then you moved around the space and you could join different conversations. You could go upstairs. There was something pretty unique about it. I wasn't going to attend this if it were in person because it was just for an hour. But for that hour, I felt...
It was fun.
I connected and had nice conversations, with a few people after the...
It worked.
Yeah, it did. It worked out.
Before we get into a really nice last segment, I do want to mention that your team or Microsoft in general brought one of the coolest pieces of tech we've seen come out in recent times, which was the Microsoft Teams plugin for Stream Deck.
Yeah,
a small
that
thing.
That is really fresh.
It's
really
buzzing.
new.
Like Twitterverse is going mad.
Yeah.
Everybody loves it. Are there any other of these things on the roadmap? Because AI, all good in there, but Stream Deck plugins, Mark?
Actual functional. I actually know a number of people on the team that have a Stream Deck, and of course, tons of MVPs, and lots of people have done some amazing things. I actually I joined a webinar that John Moore and Andy Honeycutt from the community, and they were just chatting about this new plugin. But then they were going into the weeds of what you can do with Stream Deck. I don't have one, so just to be transparent. But I did take an old iPad. It was just an iPad that I had. Loaded up Stream Deck Mobile. Loaded the plugin. And then was able to do all that. It just worked.
Wow.
And the one little thing of while we're recording, the plugin is currently not available.
Reworking.
Today.
It'll get a fix and it'll come back out. But I usually stick to my lane, not because of anything that anybody ever has told me, but I blog about lists and SharePoint, and I go a little left and right. But this one, I am not a expert in Stream Deck. I couldn't even tell you more than the plugin right now.
No,
but it was really fun, and the value was, even though Teams UI is changing, so some things are a little bit one click, but to go 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 clicks. Just to do a reaction or just to start the recording or whatever the thing with the Stream Deck, whether it's physical or the way I did it with the iPad, once you've got it loaded and you're in your meeting, to do a quick or to stop the recording, or to, like you said with your kids, somebody walks in the room, blur. It's just one tap real quick. So I don't really know of anything like what else is coming. I've read all of what people would like us to do because it's hot now. But I can see a lot of how can these physical devices, obviously with Teams rooms and all the devices for audio and video, there's a ton of innovation, and I could see something like the Stream Deck becoming another component of a room. You probably know Microsoft Rooms pretty well, or Microsoft Teams Rooms really well. And it's very dependent on the physical space, the devices, obviously our tech plus partner tech. And to see, something like Stream Deck hit a nerve. Yeah. Even to the extent, my personal is like, I was excited to give it a try. And now in my next meeting, I totally will have it open, and nobody has to know that I'm using it. It'll just be easier for me.
It's there, yeah. Okay, last question. We have some envelopes.
Yes.
And you can choose one. So choose one.
These are green envelopes. My favorite color, green.
We had English and Dutch version. I think you have an English one.
It's all English. It's all
and they're
English.
sealed too. This is a real. You have no idea what this one is.
No.
All right, let's see. Okay. On a piece of paper. It is. Name 3 things that you didn't expect when starting to work for Microsoft. It's going to have to go back almost
the way back
15 plus years. 3 things that you didn't expect. Well, at the time, the job that I took was very internal. So I didn't expect to actually talk to customers. I was not a customer-facing anybody before. Before Microsoft, I was, of course, social, but I didn't expect to talk to customers and actually have that be like a form of feedback, that we would get. The other thing I didn't expect that becomes something that they encourage you over time is you represent Microsoft first, then your product, but also now, of course, this element of community. So I also never really thought of everybody at Microsoft becomes a spokesperson for Microsoft. Because if you go to an event, or like on this podcast even, I represent the company. And I would say when I first started, I don't think I'm here to ruin anybody's life. But you get that little notion of like, watch what you say.
Yeah.
But they're also very open about it.
Sure.
Let's see. The other thing, maybe a third one. I was hoping.
Two is fine. 2 is fine.
I think
these are also
the
good
3
insights.
things. I think if anything, the part that I did learn over time was it was okay to have a non-Microsoft device, even though the joke is always like, you have a Macintosh. Or should I say just Mac? Macintosh feels old.
That feels 50 years old.
But I remember when I think the first time I got an iPhone and I walked into a meeting, you just put your phone down and you have your meeting. And I got I bet you get in trouble back at Microsoft. I'm like,
but I must say, back in the time with the Lumia 950s and Windows Phone,
I still have one.
Yeah, I had one. And
I don't use it, but I still have one.
Now I'm going to Wayback Machine with USB-C Continuum. Microsoft has always been ahead in how to enable productivity, even there with that Windows Phone device. Yeah. The UI was spot on, but it was maybe too soon, too early, because now we look back, we go like, that was a great invention, but unfortunately, things happen.
My very first Windows mobile phone was the Motorola flip phone. and I know this sounds a little silly. I wish I had it here because it would be great for the
Batman
audio.
era are we talking about?
Oh, it was like the Bat phone. But the click that it made when it opened, it has never failed. It's the most amazing hinge I've ever... kudos to the Surface team. Their hinge is pretty amazing. But nothing beats the click of the Motorola.
It's nice. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
It was nice to have you.
I love that we were able to get this excuse to go to the Treehouse.
Yes.
But also the excuse to chat with you both.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.